Imagine a place so secure that escape is considered impossible. A prison built to hold spies, bombers, drug lords, and killers who could not be controlled anywhere else. They call it the Alcatraz of the Rockies. But inside ADX Florence, the world's most dangerous inmates don't just lose their freedom. They lose almost every trace of human contact. Today, we uncover the true story of America's most notorious Supermax prison and the men trapped inside its concrete walls. To understand ADX Florence, you have to go back to the bloodiest day in U.S. federal prison history. On October 22, 1983, at the United States Penitentiary in Marion, Illinois, two correctional officers, Merle Klutz and Robert Hoffman, were brutally murdered in separate attacks by inmates Thomas Silverstein and Clayton Fountain. The killings, committed with homemade weapons inside what was then the highest security prison in America, shocked the Bureau of Prisons, BOP. According to the Bureau's official records, Marion was placed on permanent lockdown the very next day. BOP Archives 1983. That lockdown became the model for what would later be called Supermax confinement. But Marion had one fatal flaw. It wasn't designed for permanent isolation. Cells lacked the reinforced design and technological controls needed to safely contain inmates who were determined to kill, escape, or continue running criminal networks from inside prison walls. By the early 1990s, violent incidents and gang activity spread across the federal prison system. Reports from the U.S. Department of Justice showed rising assaults on staff, murders among inmates, and escape attempts involving sophisticated planning. The BOP knew it needed something beyond maximum security, a facility that would be escape-proof, staff-controlled, and capable of total inmate isolation. Construction began in 1991 in Fremont County, Colorado, near the small town of Florence. The location was no accident. The area already hosted multiple federal prisons, including a medium security and a high security penitentiary. ADX would become the crown jewel of this complex, opening officially in 1994. Journalists who toured the facility shortly after opening described it as a clean version of hell. Every detail was engineered for control. Cells made of poured concrete, doors operated remotely, sight lines designed to prevent contact between inmates, and yards divided into tiny recreation cages. Former ADX warden Robert Hood famously told the New York Times that the prison was not designed for rehabilitation. It's designed for control. NYT, 2004. But what truly made ADX infamous was not its architecture. It was the list of inmates who would one day call it home. From terrorists to cartel leaders, spies to serial killers, ADX was built to house those considered too dangerous for any other prison in America. When ADX Florence opened its doors in 1994, it wasn't just another prison. It was the final stop, a place for men who had already defied every level of correctional control. Over the years, its roster of inmates would read like a list of America's most notorious criminals. One of the most infamous was Robert Hanssen, a former FBI agent turned spy. For more than 2 decades, Hanssen secretly provided classified information to the Soviet Union and later Russia, betraying colleagues and compromising intelligence operations around the world. When he was finally arrested in 2001, the Justice Department called it possibly the worst intelligence disaster in U.S. history. Hanssen was sentenced to life without parole and sent to ADX, where he spent the rest of his life in near total isolation until his death in 2023. DOJ FBI Archives. Another ADX prisoner whose name became synonymous with terror was Ted Kaczynski, the so-called Unabomber. Between 1978 and 1995, Kaczynski waged a nationwide bombing campaign targeting universities, airlines, and technology professionals. His homemade explosives killed 3 and injured 23. After pleading guilty to avoid the death penalty, he was sent to ADX Florence, where he remained until his transfer in 2021 to a medical facility shortly before his death. Court filings, 1998. Terrorism cases filled other cells as well. Ramzi Yousef, mastermind of the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, was brought to ADX after his conviction. His plot left 6 dead and more than 1,000 injured, shaking New York City years before 9/11. He is confined under the most restrictive measures, rarely leaving his cell, and when he does, always shackled and under heavy guard. Another name tied to mass violence is Terry Nichols, the co-conspirator in the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing. Alongside Timothy McVeigh, Nichols helped assemble the truck bomb that killed 168 people, including children in a daycare center. McVeigh was executed in 2001, but Nichols lives out multiple life sentences inside ADX Florence. Perhaps the most internationally recognized inmate in recent years has been Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, the Mexican drug lord who once led the powerful Sinaloa cartel. After 2 spectacular prison escapes in Mexico, one through a hidden tunnel beneath his cell, Guzman was extradited to the U.S. in 2017. Following his 2019 conviction on drug trafficking and organized crime charges, he was sent to ADX. For him, the transfer meant an end to the near-mythical aura of escape that had defined his criminal career. Inmates like Hanssen, Kaczynski, Yousef, Nichols, and Guzman represent just a fraction of the men housed within ADX. But they all share one thing in common. They are individuals whose actions, inside or outside prison walls, left federal authorities convinced that only America's most secure prison could contain them. ADX Florence wasn't built to punish ordinary criminals. It was built for men who changed history, and for those who could still be a danger even behind bars. Not every dangerous inmate goes straight to ADX Florence. In fact, most men end up there only after proving that no other prison can contain them. The Bureau of Prisons uses a special classification system. Inmates must either pose an extraordinary escape risk, have committed serious acts of violence inside other prisons, or be deemed capable of directing criminal operations from behind bars. Federal Bureau of Prisons policy documents. One pathway is through violence against staff. Inmates who attack or kill correctional officers in other maximum security prisons are often reassigned to ADX. The Bureau considers such assaults not just crimes, but signals that an inmate is unwilling to be controlled by standard security measures. Another reason is murder behind bars. Some inmates continue their violent behavior even after being incarcerated for life sentences. For these prisoners, ADX becomes the only option left. Its architecture and policies make spontaneous attacks nearly impossible. Each cell is sealed, movement is restricted, and inmates rarely come face-to-face with one another. Then there are escape risks. ADX is often the final destination for inmates who have attempted, or even succeeded, in breaking out of other facilities. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman is perhaps the most famous example. His ability to orchestrate 2 daring escapes in Mexico convinced U.S. authorities that only Florence could guarantee he would never walk free again. But the transfer process is not casual. According to BOP records and statements by former wardens, a committee reviews each case, weighing security risks against available alternatives. The decision isn't about punishment, it's about containment. As one federal official explained to 60 Minutes, if we can't control them anywhere else, we send them to Florence. Former Warden Robert Hood once described ADX as a clean version of hell. He explained that many of the inmates were transferred there not because of their original crimes, but because of what they did after arriving in prison. This includes orchestrating gang wars, continuing drug empires, or plotting terrorist acts even while incarcerated. Interview, 2007. A chilling example comes from inmates linked to organized crime networks. Federal prosecutors argued that certain leaders could order hits and manage operations with just a phone call or a note passed through corrupt guards. At ADX, those opportunities vanish. Phones, mail, and visits are heavily monitored, and all interactions with attorneys are restricted to secure rooms with glass partitions. The philosophy is simple. ADX is for those who cannot be controlled anywhere else. It is less a prison and more a warehouse of human containment. A final stop where even the most defiant criminals are forced into silence. Step inside ADX Florence, and you'll enter a world built on silence. Inmates here spend 22 to 23 hours a day locked inside their cells. Each cell is a 7 by 12-foot box made of poured concrete, with a steel door and a small, narrow window angled toward the sky. That window design is deliberate. It allows in light, but prevents prisoners from ever knowing their exact location within the prison. Inside the cell, furnishings are molded directly into the concrete. a bed, a desk, a stool. The toilet has a built-in shut-off valve, controlled by guards, to prevent flooding. Showers are inside the cells too, reducing the need for movement. Meals are delivered through a slot in the steel door. Human contact is virtually eliminated. When inmates are allowed outside their cells, it's for 1 hour of solitary recreation per day. But even then, outside means a concrete walled enclosure sometimes described as a dog run or cage. Prisoners can see only a sliver of sky above them. They exercise alone, under heavy surveillance, before being shackled and escorted back to their cells. Contact with other humans is almost non-existent. Inmates do not share cells. Conversations are limited to shouted exchanges through ventilation grates, if at all. Visits are conducted through thick glass, with phones on each side. All mail is screened and often heavily delayed. Even interactions with guards are brief, standardized, and carefully controlled. The Bureau of Prisons argues that this extreme isolation is necessary. ADX was designed to control inmates who had already proven capable of violence, escape, or running criminal networks, even from behind bars. By cutting off communication, the system attempts to sever all influence an inmate might have on the outside world. But critics have called this level of isolation psychological torture. In 2012, a group of ADX prisoners filed a lawsuit alleging that the conditions drove inmates to self-harm, hallucinations, and suicide. According to court filings, at least several prisoners attempted or committed suicide while confined under these conditions. Human rights organizations have compared the experience to long-term sensory deprivation. Still, officials point out that ADX isn't just endless isolation. The prison also operates a step-down program. If inmates demonstrate good behavior over time, they may be granted slightly more privileges, limited group recreation, addition to phone calls, or eventual transfer to a lower security prison. But the process is slow and heavily monitored, and for many, the chance of leaving ADX alive is slim. Life inside Florence is not about rehabilitation. It's about control. For most inmates, each day is a mirror of the last. Silence, confinement, and the slow passage of time within walls designed never to be escaped. From the moment ADX Florence opened, critics have argued that its extreme isolation crosses the line into cruel and unusual punishment. Lawsuits filed in the 2000s and 2010s claimed that inmates with mental illness were left untreated, spiraling deeper into despair inside their cells. Court filings, 2012. Human rights groups, including Amnesty International, have condemned the prison as a form of long-term psychological torture. Even former wardens have admitted that ADX is a life sentence inside a life sentence. NYT 2004. Yet the Bureau of Prisons maintains that ADX is necessary, a last resort to protect staff, the public, and other inmates from men who cannot be controlled anywhere else. ADX. Florence is more than concrete and steel. It is a mirror reflecting America's deepest struggle with justice, security, and human rights. For some, it's a fortress that keeps the world's most dangerous men exactly where they belong. For others, it's a symbol of a justice system that chooses control over compassion. One thing is certain, the Alcatraz of the Rockies was designed to be the end of the line. For many who enter its walls, ADX Florence is not just prison. It is the place where freedom, connection, and hope disappear forever.